with the Goomwave, like, okay, so basically what's going on is like, I'm sure some people saw Nintendo's like tweet, and I really like, first of all, let me preface this by saying, I think Nintendo's write-up on it was spot on. Really, really good write-up. Tournament legality of Goomwave. This is something that Nintendo put out, was this thing. So last month there was a discussion about Goomwave controller legality. I wrote an article highlighting my conclusions, open discussion points, and general thoughts on custom controllers. And so the TLDR, because I mean, I'm not going to read and react to the entire article, but okay, I mean, maybe some of you guys have seen my video on the Goomwave, and I even was testing it out. I have a Goomwave. It's an old school Goom. It's the first version of the Goomwave, so it doesn't have variable PODE. My Goomwave that I have, first of all, it's with Zoo right now. I literally don't even physically have it because I gave it to Zoo because he really likes it. And my single argument or my single complaint with the first edition Goomwave was I felt like emulated PODE on the Goomwave was a little bit too strong. I would try to walk and I would accidentally dash. Literally, I would, like, it actually went the other way for me. Where, you know, back in the day, pre-UCF, people would miss their dash back. When I played with the first version of the Goomwave, I would sometimes just try to turn around. Imagine you're tech chasing with Sheik. So you down throw and then they DI behind you and you try to turn around. I would try to turn around and I would literally dash back. It was so strong, I felt. And I was telling them, Goomy, I was telling Goomy, hey, it would be cool if it wasn't so strong. The POD that you've put on there, the emulated POD, is so strong that it actually causes problems that I didn't used to have on normal controllers. And so in response to this, and I think this is something that he was already planning to do, he actually has a variable emulated POD setting because it's all done in software. And the concern, the legality concern, I think where a lot of people lie. This is the section on POD emulation if you're curious about it. I think the crux of where people are basically saying this thing might be a cause for legality concerns. And Smurf Master, thank you for the bits. Appreciate that. I think the way we're legalizing controllers is backwards. We should get a controller we can all agree should be legal and then slowly buff instead of make a broken controller like they would. Yeah, but it would never work that way, right? Like, why would anyone making a controller do that when they can make the best thing? When you're making a new product, you want to make the best product possible to get the most people interested in it, right? Well, okay, so here's the thing. I mean, I think that's literally what the Goomwave is trying to do. I don't think this like pivot up tilt thing was a goal of the Goomwave. The thing that people are basically complaining about in terms of legality is there's a technique where if you have a very specific amount of POD on your controller, and this is not a Goomwave, this is not being done with a Goomwave, this is being done with just an OEM controller. Apparently, there's a specific angle or whatever where you can like get these pivot up tilts like this, the way this Fox is doing in this quick video. Here's the thing, right? Like the emulated POD thing and the variable PODE, I think there's a little bit of a bad faith thing going on where certain people are saying, hey, Goomy clearly implemented this thing so that you could do these ridiculous techniques you can't do in a standard controller. And like, let alone the fact that this video wasn't being done on a Goomwave, it was being done on an OEM GameCube controller, right? The emulated PODE thing and the variable PODE, that was done, you know, in response to some real practical concerns. Like, for example, I was saying like, dude, I think it's literally too strong. You need to be able to customize this. And so I basically think, and here's the TLDR, which I'll read. Closing thoughts. I'm very supportive of the controller market. I appreciate that. Well, I'm not going to literally read it word for word. The big issues, a lack of detailed and understandable documentation on how alternate controllers work. Fully agreed, and I told Goomy this, and I said, Goomy, I think you just have some approachable write-ups and documentation that you give people with and alongside the Goomwave, and I think it's something that's on his radar at this point. A lack of education on the implications of new controller features. This is so true, man. This is so true, and let me talk more about this in a second. And then a lack of discussion on whether or not certain features should be legal in tournaments. Let me add a 4. Actually, Nintendo kind of talks about themselves. I can count on one hand the amount of people who have deeply looked into all of the controllers and are melee savvy enough to have educated discourse on the topic. I mean, man, I legitimately think the average melee top player used to know more about controllers back in the day than now. Okay, there's certain things we learned a lot about since then. I feel like the average melee player these days, like, there's so much hand waving and like passing of the buck. And I think the biggest problem is that no one even knows who the governing body is anymore. Who is even making a call on this stuff? Who even comes? Is it the TOs? But like the TOs don't really seem to have I don't feel like any of the TOs are that active on social media anymore. I feel like they all mostly care about their own tournament. I was talking with Nintendo about this. Like he was thinking of making some kind of small backroom kind of thing. Like, I mean, I literally don't even know who would call this shot. Is it literally all Blur? I think Blur's got some pretty, no memes aside, I think Blur's got some pretty good opinions about this sort of thing. I just don't like that usually sometimes when Blur starts these discussions on Twitter, he starts from from a very extreme point of view, a very extreme example. He'll give these very extreme examples of like that are a little bit less rooted in practicality, a little bit more rooted in like this is the worst case scenario, and it's a little bit like it almost feels a little bit alarmist, you know. If that, but that's okay. That's just the Blur. I don't unironically, I don't think Blur is like an idiot. I definitely think that Blur should be a part of these discussions, but like I just think we need to know who's even having these discussions in the first place. And the problem is that like right now, this is the big one for me. Real lack of education on the implications. I saw people, you know, people were talking about, they thought like they saw some of this stuff and they were saying like, so I heard the Goomwave has macros. And I'm like, no, it doesn't have macro would be like, I press a button on my controller and it does a multi-shine input. That's a macro. The Goomwave basically lets you customize like certain things about its analog nature, but that's existed. I have a capacitor in this controller, and capacitors have been legal forever. The capacitor lets me not have snapback in this controller. If I didn't have a capacitor in this controller, when I tried to shoot a laser with Fox or Falco, I would frequently accidentally turn around because this controller, by its nature, this particular controller has snapback. So my capacitor makes it so that I don't have to deal with snapback. You know, it's a variable capacitor, so I can turn it up or down based on like how I feel. Like, you know, if it's getting a little bit too worn in, I might turn it down, you know? And is that a macro? I really don't think that's what the word macro means, right? But I think that some people literally like, I you know, think that there's a pivot up tilt macro that the Goomwave has. And, you know, I don't think that was even, I don't even know, and this isn't even addressed in this document or this article, this specific method of inputting pivot up tilts. Okay, it only works with a very specific PODE. I don't even know if this specific PODE that is being talked about in this article, I don't even know if that's available on the Goomwave. The Goomwave has several levels of PODE that you can set it to, but if this is that specific, I don't even know if the Goomwave lets you hit that level of pivot up tilt. I mean, no one's even tried this. No one's even, I think, asked the question, and yet people are, you know, throwing around their opinions on Goomwave legality as if this is something that they can even draw a conclusion on right now, right? I think that like this brings me to another kind of point I want to make, which is, okay, so first of all, like, yeah, I think this is really important. I think that like Nintendo is right, and we should come to a conclusion on like what features we care about, and like if pivot up tilts, first of all, if we think they're that good and if we think that they shouldn't be like made easily doable, like that's something we can talk about. But I think that first of all, like I don't think the average person having this conversation even knows what that PODE value is or how this works. And I think people are like, they'll make snap judgments in terms of like, no, this is a cheating thing because, and they don't even really know why anything's the case. It's just they heard this thing that sounds like this other thing they heard, and people do this with everything, but I've noticed it's really notorious with controller discourse right now. Cody wasn't doing true pivot up tilts. They were empty pivots into an up tilt. Yeah, this isn't that, okay? This is, let me show you guys what actually is. Okay, so thank you for saying that, because there you go. He's literally not even, I could do pivot up tilts right now with empty pivots. That's completely different. And the fact that people miss, I mean, there's probably a lot of people watching this right now. The difference is that like, okay, here, let me show you exactly what's going on here. Because turns out there's a man in our midst who has literally learned this technique and uses it, and it doesn't need to be done with the Goomwave, but right here, yeah, right here, this video right here. So Zoo actually learned how to do this, and all you don't need a Goomwave to hit this. Obviously, like it's, you know, I think Zoo is using a Goomwave right now for what it's worth, but he's using the old school Goomwave. Zoo isn't even using the new Goomwave with variable PODE. He's literally just using the old school Goomwave. And there's an old video, and I remember Zoo linked this to me at one point. Let me see if I can even find it for you guys. But basically, and if you guys are curious, this is a pretty neat video that's been around long before all this discourse about Goomwaves and all this nonsense. How to pivot down tilt on a GameCube controller. It's from 2019. So this predates the Goomwave. And okay, well, we're not going to watch the entire video right now, but this is a great video that this guy makes. It's only got 600 views. Just to give you an idea of like, you know, how many people actually look into this stuff versus kind of spew nonsense opinions on the internet. And well, the TLDR is he's not doing empty pivots. He's doing real pivot down tilts with a real fucking non-modded GameCube controller. And my YouTube video isn't loading, which, you know, happens. Come on, please play. Please just play. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. So there's like a specific angle you can basically hit where this is possible. And so I feel like where I'm kind of at with this stuff is like, okay, first of all, I would want to deeply understand, I would want to fully understand why. So the claim is to hit these pivot tilts, you need a very specific PODE value. I'm not even sure that's the case. Second of all, these are not empty pivots. These are true like pivot down tilt on the first frame. So you're actually doing a down tilt on the pivot frame. You're not doing an empty pivot in place and then doing your tilt, which according to chat is what Cody was actually doing, which you definitely don't need a Goomwave for. You can do that with any pivot controller. Yeah, the Goomwave will make that more consistent in the sense that it won't have PODE out of the box. That's more just because it's a brand new controller and can do empty pivots. I would want to know exactly why there's a claim that you need a specific value of PODE to hit this technique, because this video sure doesn't make that look like the case. There's just this larger trend that I'd like to dispel of like, people see someone doing some crazy technique and their mind kind of jumps to this conclusion of like, there must be some hijinks going on. There must be some shenanigans going on. Remember how I was saying that I think that like even top players and like people who understand the game very well are guilty of this? Like, I think some of the box nerfs that Hacks implemented in his box design, I think some of those were fucking a little bit too harsh. How much harder it is to dash back out of crouch on a box versus like a frame one. Fast, you know, some of those decisions, I'm going to make it hard to dash back out of crouch because people can't dash back out of crouch reliably on a Gamecube controller. Oh, I'm going to make it so it's impossible to do pivot down tilts because people can't do pivot down tilts on a Gamecube controller. And then you look at this video and it's like, no, literally like Zoo can literally do it. This guy can literally do it. Here's a video of Zoo just doing it, right? I think even the people making these devices are basically saying like, oh, well, this is the scope of what GameCube controller users are able to consistently do today. And people have a hard time doing, for example, a great example is dash back out of crouch. And people, you know, when the box came out, no one was doing dash back out of crouch reliably. So I shouldn't make it easy to do dash back out of crouch. I should nerf that. Fast forward to today, so many people, I play so many unranked Sheiks that dash back out of crouch reliably just as part of their regular fucking gameplay. There's so many techniques where if you were to base what's fair based on what is practically doable for the average player, you know, and imagine if we used that kind of logic back in 2008 and it's like, well, people can't shield drop, people can't ledge dash with good reliability, people couldn't even fucking, you know, down throw knee Jigglypuff reliably or shit like that, right? Like the things that the average melee player can do, like, will naturally get better over time as people invest more and more. And I think it's so unfortunate to me that people make these snap judgments about practicality when they don't consider the fact that, like, you know, they're like, I want to see more of this shit. I want to see people say, you know, dude, you guys are all just fucking lazy. I can literally do this thing on a fucking vanilla game controller. But, you know, I get it. It's easier to just go on the internet and meme about how someone must be cheating and how I saw you do one multi-shine in a match. So clearly you must be using a box, right? You're using a box because it's easier to just be like, oh, my opponent's using a box. That's why you're able to have crispy tech skill. It's not because you practice more than me and I'm super lazy and, you know, it's harder to come to grips with the fact that you might just be lazy and not that good. And it's easier to just say that, like, you know, there's this ridiculous busted. And this is basically something, if you watched the Radio Melee this week with Tyler Swift, we were basically, because again, Tyler Swift uses a box and like, he was basically, you saw his face almost light up when we started talking about this, because he was basically saying like, look, man, the amount of people that don't understand how my controller works and they're like, oh, well, like, why don't you just do cheat or SDI? And it's like, I literally fucking can't, dude. But they just like regurgitate these memes. I don't know. I think it's really unfortunate. And so where I ultimately fall in this is like, I super agree with Nintendo. I think we need more people to be educated about, and if you're not, that's fine. If you're not, that's fine. If you don't think it's interesting, that's fine. You don't need to be. But I think we need some people to be educated about these things so that people can so that TOs can literally make decisions about what should be legal. I think we should come to a conclusion on like where we draw the line, and we should explicitly draw a line, right? And I think we should be proactive about that. We should be proactive about that and not have to walk it back once we've already crossed that line. And then this is where I appreciate, you know, some of the box decisions where there were certain nerfs put in ahead of time because they were very explicitly trying to avoid overstepping the boundaries of what should be legal and then having to walk it back. But yeah, I do wish there was a fucking governing body, and it just makes me like cringe. You know, I just fucking cringe when I see people say shit and they're just so wrong. And I'm like, dude, the thing you just said is wrong in so many different ways. And like, I just like, there are like 3 different things that I need to get across to you before I can even explain to you why you're wrong. And it just happens a lot, man. It just happens a lot. It actually makes me cringe. People are like, you know, what do you think about the Goomwave's macros that permit the usage of techniques that were never before able to be performed consistently in Super Smash Bros. Melee? And I'm just like, dude, like you kind of just don't know what you're talking about in several ways. And again, if that's you and you don't know what you're talking about, that's totally fine. Instead of memeing about the things you don't understand, have an open mind and try to operate with nuance and subtlety and a desire to learn and promote intelligent discourse instead of, you know, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on it. That's kind of where I'm at on it. Do you have any people in mind who actually might have informed take on this? I think Nintendo's up there. Leffen probably, yeah. Leffen probably. I think controller modders in general, I think definitely know a lot more than otherwise. Cactuar probably would know a lot. I'm honestly like, here's the thing. My current opinion is that like if it's possible in a vanilla GameCube controller, like if it's just a setting that you can get with an out of the box GameCube controller, it should be legal. However, I understand the argument against that. I understand making it too accessible if it's a technique we want to disincentivize. But I also just think that the point I'm trying to make with all this, it's not even about that. It's not even about this specific thing, this specific technique. The point I'm ultimately trying to drive home is that like, I think we need to understand. I think that as a community, I don't think we're equipped to have these discussions right now with the average amount of understanding that people have and people's tendencies to just kind of play the telephone game, right? Where we ultimately end up on pivot up tilts, like if the Goomwave needs to put out a hotfix where it's like, okay, the specific pod value to get pivot up tilts, if it's that specific, if it's a very tiny specific, okay, wait, let me put it to you one step further. Hang on a minute, because here's something you guys are forgetting. Even if out of the box, the Goomwave can give you the emulated PODE value to get pivot up tilts, as soon as the potentiometers in the Goomwave actually develop some natural pod, which will happen, then you're not gonna fucking hit it anymore. So you're just relying on an out-of-the-box Goomwave, which at that point is like saying, I don't know. I just feel like if it's that specific, if it's that specific to where you need a very specific pod value to hit the pivot up tilt in the first place, then okay, sure, you can remove that setting and say that you can't actually emulate that pod value. But at the same time, doesn't the problem kind of solve itself? Then I think the problem kind of solves itself because you're not going to be able to do it forever. I mean, look, I've gotten all kinds of controllers from people like Nez and Rien where like out of the box, they have perfect ledge dashes where if I do down and left or down and right, and then I can just do down right and I can just do the angle ledge dash, it's very easy, just the notch ledge dash. But that always lasts 3 days and then I can't do it anymore. 3 days tops. Like they'll be like, bro, this controller, try the ledge dashes. This shit's incredible because you can do the angle ledge dash. That shit will last 3 days always. So I don't know. I'm just like, then I'm not even that worried about it. I don't know. Don't the easy up tilts. Oh, the easy up tilts mod around your inputs. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't understand the easy up tilts mod. True. There is an actual, yeah, the Goomwave has one mod on it where it actually rounds some dead zone values to the up tilt value. I don't think that's necessary, and to be honest with you, I don't really understand the point. That doesn't help with pivot up tilts to my knowledge, because the pivot up tilt thing is more about hitting the pivot into the up tilt, not just getting an up tilt with the slight up tilt input. I never really understood why they had that, and when I played with the Goomwave, I didn't really feel like it helped me much. I don't really understand the easy up tilts mod or why it's there. And when I asked Goomy about it, Goomy said something like, oh, Leffen said this is something he might want to have. So I don't really super duper duper understand that. Rounding mod to me doesn't make that much sense. Yeah, I'm down for that. I'm kind of with that. The rounding should help with pivot up tilt. Not if you're bringing the stick to the gate, right? Because I think the rounding helps specifically with, well, maybe it does. I don't know. If it has, yeah, the rounding mod, which by the way isn't even discussed in this Nintendo's write up. But the rounding mod, yeah, I am curious about that one. That's a good point. It's good that you bring that up. Easier up tilt. I think pod emulation and variable pod emulation even is great. And I think that like, well, again, I think analog remapping, by the way, is fucking great. And I want to like really explicitly make the point that I don't even give a fuck, because like if I want my controller to have any of the things that like analog remapping gets you, I can do it my goddamn self. I have files. I can notch my own controller. Analog remapping is so that people don't need to get their own set of diamond files and they can just have shield drops and have you know, if they want the ledge dash angle, which I could literally notch my controller to have ledge dash notches. It does go away after 2 days, but like, if I want to be that guy, I can be that guy. Laudandus, when he was playing a lot of Melee in 2016, when he got 5th at pound and all this stuff, Laudandus literally would wake up every morning and re-notch his controller. He touched up, because this was pre-UCF, he touched up his shield drop notches every fucking morning and then did his practice routine. So like, yeah, if you want to be that guy, you can still be that guy. I just think that with analog remapping, so you don't have to, I don't think anyone should need to know how to do notches ultimately. So I don't know. It's just hard. What do you think is likely going to happen? I think we're going to legalize POD that allows pivot up tilt and detail. I think that like, what do I think is actually going to happen? Yeah, I think we should have a conversation. I think like TOs and me and Leffen or something like should have a conversation. What do I think is actually going to happen? Yeah, you're probably right. No one's going to do shit because people are lazy. And no one has, yeah, I think no one's going to do shit. But, which I don't really care that much about, to be honest with you. But again, like, dude, I don't know, man. I've got evidence right here that like fucking, you know, like it can be done, right? Like what are you gonna say? Like like this isn't doable on a Gamecube controller, but it is. So it's like, I don't know. I think easier up tilts, that could be a place to draw the line. But I just don't think that like, oh man. Would it be helpful to limit custom pod X and Y together, like no high X and low Y pod at the same time? Yeah, well, but you couldn't, you know, you could have that in a vanilla controller. You can, and then if people really fucking want it, they can play the controller lottery and get it. Someone will come around, and this is why it's hard to fucking draw a line. Someone will come around and say, well, I will find a vanilla Gamecube controller off of fucking eBay or from fucking Nez or whatever that has low this pod and high that pod. And like, you can kind of get part of the way there with capacitors too. So like, yeah, this makes it more accessible, but at the end of the day, there's still nothing, I don't know. Okay, easier up tilts with the rounding thing? Sure. Until somebody gets the vanilla GC that has pivot up tilts and 1.0 dashes, we just say it's illegal. I guess so. I don't think 1.0 dashes are that big a deal, to be honest with you. I think we should literally, I saw a, there was a tweet that was going around a while back that was making the rounds that said like, yo, just fucking patch UCF to give everyone 1.0 dashes. I kind of fucking agree. I actually kind of fucking just agree with that. I think everyone should just have 1.0 dashes. Just fucking, we already, you know, we literally modded dashback because we said that people should be able to shield drop and people should be able to dash back because we thought that like, fuck it, right? Like those are techniques that people should be able to do, which would have been, by the way, that would have been preposterous in 2008, right? Like if you went back and like, no one was shield dropping back then. That's the other side of the coin, right? Nobody's pivot down tilting right now, but like, maybe we just say, fuck it. People should be able to pivot down tilt and pivot up tilt. Just let them do it and like make it easier for everybody to do it. I don't know. We kind of did that with fucking shield drops. Pre-UCF shield drops are really hard and really finicky and really annoying. I don't know. Shield drops are really good. I don't care how good you think pivot down tilts are. Shield drops are better. So there's that argument. Maybe just let everyone do it. I don't know. We kind of did that. UCF does that, right? So I don't know. I think it really just comes down to like what we value at the end of the day. Melee is sick as fuck, but imagine Melee was also super consistent for all players. I think we're like close. I think we're close to having that. I don't know. I think that Goomwave does a lot more good than it does bad. I think like notch remapping to me, like I just think everybody should have it. I think everybody should have it. People shouldn't have to worry about, dude, let me tell you, like, I think people should not have to worry about having the perfect notch job that doesn't wear out or whatever. I think that needs to stay. I think button remapping is a good feature for that matter. You can already do it, like Blur, you know, I poke fun at Blur for this, but Blur literally hardwire swapped X and Z on his controller, which Goomwave just lets you do in software, which is a lot better, obviously. I don't know. I think there's like a lot of really good features that should just be there. I think we should have a conversation about ultimately where we draw a line, but to me, I don't really think we've hit that line. Even if there was some shenanigans going on with the pivot down tilt stuff, with the pod stuff, I'm still not even sure we've hit that line, but I think it's at least good to get the conversation started, which is ultimately why I think this write-up from Nintendo was really, really good. I should have like a call with him. Maybe next week, not even next week. What, today's Wednesday, right? Maybe even later in the week, I'll like get Nintendo on and we'll like talk about it or something. Maybe I'll do a little roundtable, do a little stream roundtable. I'll get like Gumi on, get like Nintendo on, and like maybe Cody or some shit. I feel like Cody would have some good stuff to say.